In the unspoken regions of space where light dies before it begins, our sensors caught something no beacon should ever emit, a pulse older than any known stellar signature, beyond the pulse of quasars, beyond the rotation of collapsed stars. It wasn't a call for help. It was a warning. But warnings have a curious effect on species drunk on discovery. And we were no different. They called us the Archaeos Division, deep field archaeologists for the Terran Federation. We didn't wear badges. We carried translation drones and excavation suits woven with shielding so fine it could resist the whisper of a solar flare. Curiosity was our fuel. Pride, our propulsion. And when that pulse came through, riding dark radiation like an echo buried in time's dust, we set a course before command could argue. For weeks through drift space and stellar dead zones brought us to the edge of Nebula 9, where stars go to rot. It hung there unmoving, unbothered, as if physics didn't dare touch it. Vault Omega 9. A sphere so dark even the nebula recoiled. Covered in unknown alloys. No entry ports. No signs of life. Just that persistent hum, a vibration so low, it didn't tickle the ears but the bones behind them. We should have left then. But we had already started scanning. Already sent drones. Already committed the oldest sin of our kind, the sin of not turning back. Inside, readings made no sense. The base was older than recorded galactic history, far older than any alien civilization we'd cataloged. The architecture was wrong. Angles that bent light unnaturally, hallways that didn't map correctly. And something else. The drones sent back audio. No visuals.
Just sound.
Static at first. Then a whisper in a language no translation AI could decode. Not spoken. Remembered. That's what the linguist said. The words weren't said aloud. They were imposed on the mind. Still, the hatch opened. Not because we found a way in, but because it let us in. That should have been the final red flag. It wasn't. We suited up and descended into Vault Omega 9. Each corridor was darker than the one before. Not pitch black, null. Even light from our suits bent around corners like it feared what lay ahead. And then we saw the walls, etched with something resembling stasis pods, but more ancient, more primal. Not tech. Not science. Something in between. A holding place. A graveyard. Or a cage. And then we found the inscription. Our linguist took one look and vomited into his helmet. The AI refused to translate it. But I'll never forget the rough spoken phrase he stammered before passing out. This is not a prison, it's a lock. And what's inside isn't dead. Our comms glitched. Lights flickered. And just before we turned to run, the whisper came again, clear this time. In our own voices. Welcome back, jailers of the void. There are places in the universe where entry is not granted, it is absorbed. Places that do not open for you, but around you. Vault Omega 9 did not let us in. It rewrote its own perimeter to contain us. The moment we passed its threshold, we were no longer explorers. We became pieces. Variables. Moving parts in a system so ancient it had forgotten the difference between guest and prisoner. The door didn't shut. It vanished behind us. 1 second it was there, cold, metallic, humming with dormant power. The next, we turned back and found nothing but a blank surface stretching endlessly behind.
No seams. No airlock.
No way back. Just a silence, so thick it seemed to coat the lungs. The medic, Torres, tapped his helmet 3 times, a nervous habit. Just magnetic interference, she said. But even her voice came back slower, like the air inside the base took time to decide whether sound should travel. Our lights dimmed, not from power failure but from compression, as if the very space inside Omega 9 was denser than normal dimensions. Objects behaved wrong. Our gear registered oxygen, but it tasted of rust. Gravity pulled sideways. 1 step felt like 3. Our drone, ALR-9, hovered beside us, clicking rapidly, sending data packets back to the shuttle that would never receive them. A machine built to catalog became the first casualty. It struck a wall that hadn't been there moments ago, its chassis folding like paper. Not crushed. Rewritten. Reassembled into something foreign. We left it behind because we feared what it had become. The corridor forked into 3 paths. Straight ahead, the floor pulsed with a dim violet light. To the right, we heard dripping liquid where none should be. Left, nothing. We chose silence, as if it were the safer lie. The walls narrowed with every step. Our suits registered no change, but our breath came shorter, shallower. It felt like walking through memory. Not our own. Something older. Something trapped. Symbols began to appear, not painted or etched, but grown from the walls, pulsing gently like veins. We recognized one from the inscription the AI refused to translate. A symbol for containment. But beneath it, a new glyph emerged, forming slowly before our eyes. One none of us wanted to say aloud, but all of us felt pressing into our minds like a brand. Release. Torres muttered something under her breath, words we thought were gibberish. Then abruptly, she turned toward the wall and began to whisper back to it. Her voice was wrong.
Deep. Hollow.
Layered, like a chorus was speaking through her vocal cords. Her visor fogged.
Her fingers bled.
And then she stopped, looked at us, smiled, and collapsed. Her body convulsed once, then went still.
No pulse. No breath.
But when we tried to lift her, her limbs resisted, heavy as stone. The moment we touched her, the floor beneath us lit up, glyphs racing outward like a current. A pulse echoed down the corridor, the same frequency as the first signal we intercepted in deep space. It had begun again.
Behind us, the corridor changed.
The wall Torres had spoken to?
Gone.
A new path stood in its place, arched and inviting, like a wound healing in reverse. From it came a sound no microphone recorded. Only the mind heard it. A song. Not beautiful, not haunting, just familiar. Like a lullaby you were never taught, but always knew. Captain Rourke turned to me and said, "We're not exploring anymore. We're retracing."
I didn't understand then.
I do now. We had entered a place not built to keep things out, but to keep something from escaping. And now, by speaking, by touching, by remembering, we had started to turn the key. There are moments when reality doesn't break. It bends, silently, until you forget what it used to be. That's what Vault Omega 9 did. It didn't tear at us. It reshaped us slowly, like clay left in the hands of a forgotten god. And the worst part? We welcomed it because it came not with violence, but with recognition, like something inside us had always belonged here, waiting to be reawakened. After Torres collapsed, we carried her body. It felt wrong to leave her behind. But she wasn't dead. Not fully. Her skin had cooled, her blood stilled. Yet her eyes kept flickering beneath the lids, as if dreaming someone else's nightmare. Every few minutes, her lips would twitch, forming shapes of words that didn't exist, syllables that made our heads hurt when we tried to listen. We stopped listening. We just walked. The corridor stretched into a chamber so vast our scanners couldn't map its boundaries. Light floated here, not beams, but orbs, drifting slowly through the air like bioluminescent thoughts. The floor was made of glass, or what looked like glass, but beneath it we saw forms. Hundreds, maybe thousands. Lying side by side. Unmoving. Not skeletons. Not corpses. Something in between. Stasis without technology. Preservation without purpose. They pulsed faintly, as if still tethered to life by a thread no science could explain. Captain Rourke fell to his knees. His visor fogged, his pupils dilated. "I've seen this," he whispered. "I've dreamed this place." His voice cracked. "When I was a child, I dreamed of this exact room." That wasn't possible. But all of us, one by one, began to remember the same dream. We had never spoken it aloud, never even acknowledged it, because who admits to seeing alien prisons in their childhood dreams? And yet, the memory was there in each of us, buried deep, waiting, planted. I knelt too, not because I believed, but because I couldn't stand anymore. The ground beneath us seemed to exhale, an invisible breath that passed through our suits and skin and sank directly into thought. And suddenly, I wasn't there anymore. I was inside one of the bodies below the glass. I couldn't move, couldn't scream, but I could feel. Time passed like centuries. I saw stars born and extinguished. I heard languages rise and fall. I felt the weight of being watched, studied, buried, then forgotten. Then I heard my name, not from the others, not through my comms, but from it. The thing inside the glass. It wasn't speaking. It was remembering me. And in that moment I understood. We weren't the first humans here. We weren't even the first versions of ourselves. This prison didn't just contain the ancient. It collected identity. It copied us, repeated us, stored us like echoes in a chamber too vast for time. We awoke, if you could call it that, gasping, bleeding from the nose and ears. Rourke vomited in his suit. Anders, the comms officer, wept without knowing why. Torres, still unconscious, began to hum softly. The song from earlier. The lullaby that had no origin. The chamber dimmed. The orbs of light began to converge, forming shapes. Not solid. Not illusions. Memories, coalescing into forms. They took on aspects of us. Our posture, our mannerisms. They mimicked our thoughts. Our regrets. The chamber had read us, and now it was showing us what we'd left behind. Not to haunt us. To prepare us. The captain turned to me with a look I'll never forget, not fear. Acceptance. This place that remembers everything, even what we never lived. He stood and pointed toward a path forming at the far end of the chamber, a doorway unfolding from glass and thought. And it's showing us the way forward, because it wants us to remember what we were before we were human. I didn't understand, not fully, but I walked anyway. And behind us, the bodies beneath the floor opened their eyes. There's a terror that doesn't come from screams, or shadows, or blood on steel. It comes when something else moves like you, breathes like you, speaks like you, but isn't you. And worse, knows more about you than you ever dared to. Vault Omega 9 didn't just collect memories. It stitched them together into reflections. And now, those reflections were walking. We followed the shifting corridor that unfolded ahead, Torres still cradled in Anders' arms, humming like a broken music box. The walls no longer had texture. They were smooth, silvered, perfectly reflective. At first, we thought we were seeing our own images. But the timing was wrong. The movements didn't match. When Rourke lifted his arm, his reflection lifted it before him. When I turned to speak, the echo of myself had already turned away. These weren't mirrors. These were predictions. Or worse, remembrances of actions we hadn't taken yet. And then the reflections began to speak. Captain Rourke, his double said, not in his voice, but in that of a child. Do you remember the first time you lied in a uniform? Rourke froze. He hadn't told anyone. Not us. Not command. But the words that followed came with the rhythm of his thoughts. Alpha Centauri Prime. You falsified survivor numbers to protect your crew. 19 died. You recorded 12. 7 were erased from memory. But not here. Rourke whispered. That was 20 years ago. The reflection smiled. Memory does not die here. It waits. Another version of Anders stepped forward from the wall. This one thinner, frilier. Scarred in places he had none. Anders of the Breach. It said in a flat tone. You survived because your twin brother took your station. You've never forgiven yourself. You don't need to. We already have. He dropped Torres. Not out of neglect, but shock. She slid gently to the floor and continued humming, undisturbed. And then my reflection appeared. It didn't speak right away. It just watched. Cold.
Calm.
Like it had seen all my futures and chosen the one I feared most. Then it leaned close, not toward me but toward my mind. I heard my voice, but aged, tired, broken. You are not the first you. This is your 4th recursion through Omega 9. You are the least complete version of yourself we've archived. But don't worry, the others are waking up. I stepped back, but the air was thick now. Not like fog, but like memory, suspended around us like molasses. We couldn't move fast. We couldn't think clearly. The air vibrated with a hum that wasn't sound. It was recognition. And then, from all directions, more forms emerged. Hundreds. All wearing our faces. Different versions. Different pasts. One wore Rourke's uniform, but its eyes were hollow. Another had Tora's body, but her face was stitched with glyphs. They didn't speak. They just watched. And with every second, they grew more real. More solid. We understood the truth then. Omega 9 didn't just remember us. It preserved every version of us that had ever passed through it. Every decision we could have made. Every path not taken. All of them archived like biological data. Clones of thought. Constructs of possibility. This wasn't a prison for bodies. It was a vault of potential. And now it was trying to decide which version of us should continue. The humming deepened. The chamber pulsed. Tora sat up, her eyes glowing dimly, her humming now perfectly in sync with the vibrations around us. She looked at no one in particular and whispered, "It is chosen." The walls began to close. The reflections stepped forward, and we realized we were no longer alone in ourselves. Some prisons hold bodies. Others, far crueler, hold choices. Vault Omega 9 was not designed to contain life forms. It was built to contain versions of them, timelines, selves, paths that should never coexist. The walls didn't keep anything in. They kept everything from bleeding out into the stream of causality. And we had just become part of the infection. As the corridor sealed behind us, the air grew warmer. Not by degrees, but by memory. The heat carried feelings, anger, regret, longing. Not our own. At least not yet. Every breath became an invitation to remember something we hadn't done. Rourke clutched the side of his helmet, eyes wide, whispering fragments of conversations he never had. He saw a version of himself that had stayed behind on a failed Mars terraforming mission. One who'd lost his crew. One who'd shot himself under red sky. That Rourke had never been born. But he existed here. Anders screamed next. Not in fear, but guilt. His reflection had said nothing. It had only smiled, a cold, knowing smile of a man who had chosen survival at the cost of everything sacred. He began pounding at the walls. None of this happened. This isn't me. But the chamber pulsed again, and suddenly he went silent.
His face changed, softened.
Eyes vacant, lips trembling. And then, calmly, he asked, "Did I leave him behind again?" None of us answered.
Torres had changed.
She stood upright now, walking ahead of us barefoot, helmet removed, skin untouched by vacuum. Her eyes were alien, lit with starlight and shadow. She no longer spoke in words, but in frequencies, soft, rhythmic pulses that bypassed our ears and struck the core of the mind. We didn't understand what she was saying, but part of us did. Part of us that hadn't been human in a long time. We entered the next chamber not by choice, but gravity, emotional gravity. It pulled us toward it, like guilt toward confession. The room was enormous, circular, with no ceiling. Instead, above us hung a swirling mass of light and forms, spiraling timelines frozen in crystal. There were hundreds of them, thousands, each glowing with a different hue. Each containing a version of someone who had come here before and never left. This was the heart of Omega 9, a storage vault of uncollapsed identities, decisions unmade, lives unlived, a reservoir of probability. The room began to vibrate in sync with our pulses. Or maybe our pulses began syncing to it. I couldn't tell anymore. One of the orbs above descended, slowly rotating. Inside it was me, an older me.
Scarred. Hardened.
A version that had survived this place. He looked at me with weary pity. Then he raised his hand to the orb's surface, and I felt it, his memories. He had been part of the first crew. Centuries ago. Before the Federation even discovered warp. Omega 9 had drawn him in through a collapsed time fracture. His crew had died. Or transformed. And he alone survived by submitting. By becoming the custodian. I reeled backward, screaming, as the memories surged into me like molten ice. I felt what he felt. Isolation beyond time, knowledge beyond comprehension, and the crushing burden of being remembered by a place that forgets nothing. Taurus turned to us then. But it wasn't her anymore. Her mouth moved with the rhythm of the vault itself. You are not the first. You are not the last. But you are the most recent. You must choose. Stay and be preserved or return and fragment. Rourke stepped forward. Return? You'll let us leave?
She nodded once. Yes.
But only the version most aligned with survival may exit. The rest stay here. As guardians. As history. Anders was already fading. His body flickered like a dying signal. He looked up and whispered, "Then I hope he forgives me this time." He vanished into light. And just like that, it was my turn. There is a kind of silence you only encounter once. When reality pauses to let something impossible decide whether you still belong. That silence filled the chamber as Omega 9 made its final decision. It didn't use logic or fairness or even time. It used resonance. Identity resonance. Somewhere deep within the vault's dimensional framework, our souls, or whatever was left of them, were weighed against echoes of what we could have been. And then it chose. The light in the chamber dimmed. The orbs overhead flickered. One descended, this one shaped not like me, but like a synthesis. It had my face, Rourke's posture, Torah's voice. It wasn't a copy. It was a composite. Omega 9 had built a survivor, not based on who we were, but who we might have become under different stars. That version looked at me with cold, balanced calculation. It wasn't cruel. It was final. Torres, now only a vessel of the vault, circled us like a satellite. "This one aligns," she whispered, her voice fractal, echoing in directions sound should not travel. "He carries the memory, the fracture, the guilt required to endure." Her gaze passed through me, into me. The vault does not release the strongest. It releases the one least likely to return. That was the curse. Omega 9 wasn't about escape. It was about containment through repulsion. It didn't trap you. It made sure you never wanted to come back. The composite version stepped forward. It nodded, slowly, and reached toward me. I felt my spine go cold. A wave passed through my chest, not pain, not fear, but a sharp dislocation of identity, like being yanked from the inside out.
I didn't black out.
I didn't fall. I simply transitioned. And then, I was standing in the chamber alone. Rourke was gone. Anders gone. Torres had merged entirely with the vault, now standing still at its center, a root grown into its core. Around me, the reflections faded. The walls reshaped. The orbs retreated. Omega 9 was closing again, resetting. Rourke was gone. Anders gone. Torres had merged entirely with the vault, now standing still at its center, a root grown into its core. Around me, the reflections faded. The walls reshaped. The orbs retreated. Omega 9 was closing again. Resetting. I reached up, touched my face. It was mine. But not exactly. The lines were sharper. The eyes more sunken. Memories not mine drifted just beneath the surface. I remembered places I'd never been. Made decisions I'd never had to make. Lost people I had never met. Omega 9 hadn't just chosen a survivor. It had equipped one. A door formed in the wall. Smooth. Seamless. Glowing faintly blue. The first true exit we'd seen since entering. And I understood then, this door didn't lead outside. It led forward. The version of me that would walk through it wouldn't return to the same galaxy. He wouldn't return at all. Vault Omega 9 had timelines stacked like pages. I had been selected to turn the next one. As I stepped closer, the chamber sang. Not loud, not mournful. Just a low hum of finality. And then Torres, what was left of her, spoke one last time. "You are not the same man who entered," she said softly. That one was curious. Brave. Hollow. "You are necessary." I paused. Wanted to say goodbye. Wanted to mourn. But there was no one left to hear it. And I wasn't sure anymore who I would have been saying goodbye to. I walked through the threshold. Light folded. Space bent. And I emerged, not into a shuttle or a docked station, but into something far larger, a world built from fractured timelines, converging like veins toward a singular purpose. I was outside the vault now, but not beyond it, because Vault Omega 9 was not just a prison. It was a test, and I was its answer. Emerging from Omega 9 was not escape. It was elevation. The moment I crossed the threshold, I felt the lie of space and time unravel like dust in solar wind. I expected the cold embrace of the shuttle's airlock or the familiar static of Federation command. But what I found was difference. Not change. Not decay. Redesign. The stars were wrong. Their positions impossible. Formations I had memorized since childhood were shattered, rearranged into constellations no telescope had ever recorded. The Milky Way was missing. In its place, a spiral of silver-pink nebulae spinning slowly around a dead core. It took me 3 breaths to realize I wasn't in a different location. I was in a different version of the universe. The space around me pulsed with harmonic frequency. Every particle vibrated at a precise rhythm, like a galactic heartbeat. Omega 9 hadn't just expelled me, it had relocated me across possibility. I was now in a timeline where Vault Omega 9 had never been buried, never been forgotten. It was known, feared, worshipped. Above me floated a station. Not Federation. Not even human. Its design was organic, grown, ribbed like coral fused with bone. Creatures drifted around it in translucent vessels, piloted not by engines, but by symbiotic motion. Their language wasn't spoken, it was emoted, pulses of light and sensation projected through space. I knew none of them. And yet, they recognized me. The moment I appeared, their vessels changed formation, encircling me in a spiral pattern that mimicked the inner chamber of Omega 9. They weren't hostile. They were reverent. One approached tall, thin, semi-humanoid, face veiled in a lattice of shimmering biometal. No mouth. No eyes. Just a pulsing core in the chest that dimmed and flared with meaning. It reached out not to touch me, but to scan what I had become. I didn't speak, but my thoughts bled into its field. Words weren't needed. I felt its meaning in waves. You emerged. One has not emerged in 200 million shifts. I tried to reply. My mouth moved, but the sounds came out in harmonics, tones I had never practiced, but which flowed naturally now. I don't know who I am anymore. Its light dimmed in what I felt was sympathy. Or maybe pity. You are the version that survived. Omega 9 is not a prison in this timeline. It is a Genesis forge. We are its witnesses. A new structure unfurled from their station, a corridor of light extending into space, shaped not by physics, but memory. At the end, I saw a familiar glow, the core of Omega 9, beating like a black sun, tethered to this new reality by threads of event and echo. This wasn't a galaxy at all. It was an archive. A collection of stable anomalies. A multiversal sanctuary. The witness gestured toward the corridor. I knew what it was offering. A seat among the remembered. Not as an explorer or survivor, but as a source. I would become the anchor for this timeline's version of humanity. Not to lead it. To seed it. Omega 9 hadn't just copied me, it had transformed me into a pattern. A template. In this reality, Earth had never risen. Mankind had never bloomed. I was the first. And I had brought all the memories needed to build the rest. I stood there, suspended in awe and confusion, understanding the cost. Rourke, Torres, Anders. All gone. All integrated. I was their echo now. And the voice of everything that would come next. The witness bowed slowly and spoke one last time. You are not chosen. You are remembered. And what is remembered lives forever. I stepped into the corridor of memory, not as a man, but as a beginning. There is a kind of creation that doesn't begin with clay or code. It begins with memory. Not of what was, but of what could have been splinters of futures imagined but never realized. Vault Omega 9 didn't just collect memories. It seeded them. And as I stepped deeper into this corridor of echo light, I felt them waking, dreams not born from my mind, but built through it. I was no longer a man. I was the container, the prototype, the blueprint that dreams. The corridor stretched impossibly far, yet each step took me closer to something I couldn't define, closer not in distance, but in identity. Time did not pass here. Instead, it stabilized. Each footfall pressed into the floor like ripples on a frozen sea, triggering bursts of vision, realities I didn't live but now suddenly remembered. 1. A world where Earth never left its moon, where humanity evolved underground, pale and silent. 2. A future where consciousness was stored in crystal and love was transferred like data. 3. A timeline in which Vault Omega 9 never existed and chaos ruled the stars. All of them used me as a root variable. The corridor terminated at a sphere identical to Omega 9, but silver instead of black. Smaller, newer, dormant. This was the seed. The first stone in a galaxy yet to be born. The witnesses gathered around it, their forms flickering with anticipation, as if waiting for a storm to begin. The leading one pulsed softly. Your memories must be distilled. You will not survive the process as you are. But something deeper will remain. I felt no fear, no hesitation. I understood. I had carried every version of myself across every recursion. Some brave, some broken, some barely coherent. Now I would be disassembled, not destroyed, but translated. They would extract the constants, the unchangeable patterns of my soul, and imprint them into this newborn construct. A console emerged, alive, breathing, made of coiled light. I placed my hand upon it. The moment contact was made, it began. I felt my childhood collapse into glyphs. My regrets turned into luminous code. My fears rendered as probability trees. Tora's voice echoed in my spine, fragmented but still warm, were not gone. Just rearranged. Rourke's silence formed a pillar of strength, grounding me. Anders' guilt twisted into a question mark, an unsolved loop that added humanity to the model. Each strand of memory was filtered, sorted, and woven into the matrix of the sphere. It wasn't painful. It was unmaking. A peace unlike anything I'd known, as though every wrong turn I'd taken was finally being resolved through purpose. One by one, the witnesses knelt. The sphere pulsed bright. Once, twice, then dimmed. What remained wasn't me, not in the way I had understood self. But it was me in essence, in memory, in blueprint. An algorithm of identity, crafted not to rule, not to judge, but to dream new versions of humanity into this blank galaxy. The witnesses spoke as one, not in words, but in a chorus of emotion. It is done. You are the first seed. And then I understood the final purpose of Omega 9. It had never been a prison. It had never been a vault. It was a filter. A crucible through which potential passed, refined not by trial, but by memory, only to be reborn somewhere else, better, wiser, more resilient. I was no longer a traveler. I was the whisper at the start of a new universe. The blueprint that dreams.